Come on, Bear. Come on, mate. This is a common, so it's public land. Common land is actually owned by people, but everybody has a right on it. So this is owned by the National Trust, but we have a right to walk on it. You have, if you have grazier's rights, you can put sheep and pigs, cattle and horses on it. It was normally the worst land. It was like the top of the hill where the soil is the thinnest, and it was kind of leftover land. And if you were a peasant without any money or property, you can graze it and you don't have to pay for it. So that's common land. So this is common, this side. That means people interact with our building here. They look through the window, and I kind of feel we have a duty to the public. If people look through the window, I very often invite them in to explain the story to them, because architecture is a public art. It is something that people outside the building have a right to interface with. Come on, Bear. I think it was probably a dowager house, but anyway, when we came here, there was this ruin here.
So you can see a bit what might have been, no? Right here?
There was actually three. This was a house, this was a house, and in about 1975, these were all proper houses. But once you get a little bit of a hole in the roof, property deteriorates very quickly. This building has totally fallen down. Yeah, once the roof goes, everything goes. This was a total ruin. It was so covered in ivy when we came here that a lot of people, you didn't know it was here. It was so overgrown. So, come on inside.
So, I mean, this is probably one of the most unique homes I've ever seen.
Yeah, I'll show. I think the best way to see it is to see it from here, then you kind of get it. So this part of the house was probably a stable built for animals, and it fell down altogether. This was probably for humans and was a bit better made, and so it stood up.
But you found that this was beautiful.
Well, I'll tell you the real story is I was quite happy to put a bulldozer through it because I just thought I could rebuild this. But I wasn't allowed to because our property is listed. That means it's protected. It was really dangerous to go into it, and the conservation officer just said you've got to preserve it. So he actually suggested taking the frame down and putting it back and rebuilding it. But actually I just thought it'd be a lot cheaper and easier to have just put a whole building over the top of it. So the other thing is this involves some cost. To preserve a building is it's not quite half, but I would say at least it costs a third or more to keep the building. So it gave the existing building value. So my theory was, if it's going to give it value, everything here is expensive. Everything in the old stuff is very valuable. So that includes the ivy, the dust, the cobwebs, everything. It has a value. So we didn't want to destroy it. As a matter of fact, during the process, it was really difficult to tell people that this was really the bit that was really expensive. You see, if you've got a new wall like that, people tend to protect it, and they'll tend to bash the old stuff around. So you need to keep telling people, including our children, who would shoot down the good bits with their guns, with their BB guns. They shot out the glass in the windows, which was really annoying. So we've just put another building over the top of it, and everything is preserved. There's actually a steel frame around the new building, and then this is anchored to the steel frame. It's probably quite stable, but we're just making sure it didn't all fall over one day.
So it looks like the house would have extended out more?
It would have come out, that would have been the stables, and that's why we were allowed to build out to here. But we have certain rules that we set up for ourselves. So here the windows could be exactly as we wanted them to do in terms of performance. In the old part of the building, we always followed the existing windows. So there's two sets of windows in most places. There's an old window and a new window on the outside. So we left exactly the window as it is, the old window, including the broken glass, which if you need to open this window, you cut your hand on as you do that. As you can see, but it's possible. It's inconvenient, but it's worth it. I don't quite know why it's worth it, but it is. I just want to show, like the kitchen here, one of the things is I want to show it's not a fitted kitchen. It's actually kept away from the walls, and so it doesn't touch them. And that was kind of part of the idea that, you know, you don't damage the walls because they have value. But it could all be just taken out and the walls will all be the same.
So you can see even how the walls were made at the time.
Yeah.
When would that have been?
I think these are about 300 years old. But you can see this is called daub and wattle. This wood is put across on the frame, and then this is a plaster which is squashed onto it, and then it's normally mixed with horsehair to reinforce it. Then it makes a wall like this on the other side. As you can see.
Horsehair.
Horsehair. They put horsehair in the plaster normally. Remember, horses were the main source of power.
So we forgot those
Yeah,
things.
there would have probably been 100 horses on this estate, if not more. You know, this would be part of the Croft Castle. That's a big estate, and they would have had a lot of horses. So, these are brick ties, and they're probably from about 2000, the year 2000. And they were hanging here when we came here. And because we have this rule of not touching anything, we left them. I mean, like everything, there's quite modern bricks here. You treat it all as a kind of something to be preserved, even if they're 10 years old or something. And these beams, surprisingly enough, sometimes we had to cut through them like this. Although it's incredibly old, it's incredibly solid. It's oak, and it's actually gone like rock over the years. And these beams are actually incredibly strong. Sometimes they're rotted away. When we built this with everybody local. So I've got friends who's a local farmer, and whenever we needed a detail, he'd just knock us up a bracket like that, and that would hold the end of this rotted beam. So we kind of used farmers to build it, and lots of local trade. For example, all of the corrugated iron came from down the road, and steel frame came from down the road. Almost everything came from down the road, you know.
Here it looks like you just dropped the metal structure on top of the old, no?
This, yeah, I think it is. I mean, this floor had fallen through here. So, and there was a staircase in this position. You can see that there used to be a staircase here coming down. And so we've kind of put the staircase back in.
So here you see that there was only a beam left.
Yeah, that was it. All the roof had come down here. And also the building fell to bits a bit as we were working on it. You know, we had to dig out all the floors, it became unstable. Building is a kind of clumsy process. People knock things around.
And you can even see there how it sort of,
Yeah.
Does that look like it's...
This looks like it's going to fall down, look, any minute. It will, but we'll have to just clear that up.
So this is a living project.
It is. Also, I just want to point out we preserved the cobwebs. We don't clean the cobwebs on the old stuff, but we clean it on the new stuff.
So you took this to sort of an extreme. Obviously, preserving didn't mean you had to preserve the ivy and all that, but you felt...
I tried to preserve it, it died. I think it didn't get enough sunlight. I was hoping it would keep growing. So there's a little bathroom in here. So that's kind of tucked in.
Oh, but you fit.
Yeah.
You don't have your towel.
I like showers that work well, and there's lots of space to lay out your stuff, like shelves. And most proud of this flush. You press it there, and it goes through a cistern up here, and then the water comes down here. Because we didn't have room, there's a massive old beam in here, which we didn't want to cut. So this is the guest bedroom. This is where mainly we have people who work with us stay here. Because we're quite isolated, we have to have people come and help us in the office. And
Design work. Or
yeah, we're designers. I did this with my wife, Kate, Darby, who is in London this weekend. So there used to be a floor from here to here, but it fell through. With the roof had gone here as well, so the floor went. And you can see that joists used to go across here. And that was the grate for this room. You get it when you see the grate, the fireplace, suspended in midair. And then I made that face.
And that would have been the end of the house at this end.
Yeah, and that would have been the window. So that's why it's got another window here, but this deteriorated a lot.
Since you've been here.
Oh,
No. It's actually, as a conservation piece, this piece is seriously conserved now. If you wanted to study 300-year-old cottage frames, this would be a really good place to study it. The building will not deteriorate any further because it's not keeping the weather out anymore. The new building keeps the weather out. If we repaired the old building, it would still have to repel the moisture. And that's the main problem with conservation. So this frame may be preserved for another 300 years, whilst the existing ones may not last that long. So it is a kind of conservation project. What I think a lot of people like about this is the familiar shape. So the shape is dictated by the building underneath, which is a cottage. The cottage probably had a thatch roof, which means that the roofs are very steep, about 49 degrees. And that was necessary to make the thatch work, as opposed to tiles or modern membranes can actually be flat. It's a kind of iconic shape, and that is what people tend to like. And then the material that it's clad in is just a very simple corrugated iron. So this is the corrugated iron, and corrugated iron was invented in London in about 1820. So it's quite an old material. The reason we used it is because it's used in farm buildings everywhere, and it's used all over the countryside in Herefordshire. It's very familiar. As a matter of fact, when we finished this job, somebody on the common came up to me and said, "You should convert that barn." I just want to show you these marks. This is why we had to preserve everything. As you can see, the marks of the carpenters. It's a code that the joiners would have, or the carpenters would have, in order that they could fit it all together. And there may even be bits of other houses here, because they would reuse houses. What you have to remember is before power tools, a beam or something was an immense labour to cut. You'd have to cut it by hand with probably double-edged saws. So everything would be done by hand without power tools. So everything had real value in a way. So you may, if you had a beam from another cottage, you try and reuse it. But then they have these codes to how to fit it together.
And so because that was there,
That was when the conservation officer looked at this and said, "You've got to keep it all." And I thought, that just cost me £80,000, that conversation. It's the most expensive conversation I've ever had in my life, I think. So this is the living room. So here you can see the windows again, more or less.
Matches up, doesn't it?
Yeah. But it's quite nice, that. I like that. And then this is sacking. I don't know what this was for really, but it was here. I think it was used as a saddle room. I think these were putting saddles on. Perhaps it was used as an outhouse as well as, you know, this obviously was a main fireplace with a bread oven, so it was occupied, but it may have been abandoned and become a kind of stable or something. And this, some special conservationist told me what this was, but I've forgotten what it is. I found a lot of pictures in our store which all went damp and mouldy, so I hung those up.
So you weren't afraid to use modern fixtures?
No, that's kind of to do with it performing. You know, these are really good windows, I have to say. I like the things that perform in a modern way. And if you're building something, you should at least keep the place warm and efficient. Like on the roof, we have PVs, and then we have a water collection system for hot water. This is my favourite detail. This post here, existing post, which holds the floor above, we were worried about it, was really eaten through. So we really didn't know how strong that was. So we went down the road and bought a piece of steel with my friend Martin, the farmer, and we stuck the piece of steel in and we screwed it up. And I'm sure that piece of steel is going to hold the floor above. And I just like that simplicity of doing stuff like that. And look, here's some bricks, which are probably quite new, but they got preserved. You can see they're modern bricks. Used to infill between the old lath and plaster.
So in a way, a lot of this was impromptu. You saw something. And
Yeah, we had a
it
problem.
wasn't-
So we just go and buy a piece of steel and screw it in. Just screwed in with some Phillips screws. I like all of that. We had a split beam here, so we went and got a couple of old bits of timber and just bolted it either side of the beam. It's called the splint. And you can see that we had to put a plywood here, so we painted it black. So that actually spreads the load over here, because we're never really sure how strong everything is. And I just want to show you two things. We moved in here for about a year or so, and then we found this tin can, which we hadn't noticed. And we thought it would be full of gold coins, but it wasn't. It was full of junk. Anyway, it's a nice tin can, and I kind of like that. And then I did want to show you the bird's nest.
Oh, yeah.
But we've got to go upstairs. So the house is it's actually also designed to be a 3-bedroom house with 2 bathrooms. This is actually designed to be a bedroom. This little space here, if we needed it, and we would cut a hole to go through to that bathroom. But I do like that wall. And look at the cobwebs there, how good they are. But look, there's a bird's nest here. We just discovered that.
You just discovered it,
Yeah.
but it's been there for...
Yeah, forever.
So when you first came, this ivy was alive.
Everything was alive. We had to cut it all off. It was destroying the building.
So there was so little left of this
Yeah.
area.
That's why I was kind of surprised that we had to preserve it.
So this, like for instance, this beam seems...
Oh, God, it's really, it's rubbish. It really, look, it has been eaten away, but it's probably not holding anything. Probably that's holding everything together. And then, like I say, we have strapped it all up. It seems pretty solid. It's pretty, it's pretty precarious.
But you have the floor. This is solid.
I think so. We put some plywood across it. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think we've had 3 people up here. Normally, we did the testing by jumping up and down on things. We actually had an engineer, and he said that there was so much to calculate that he just gave up, actually. So me and the farmer did it by jumping on things. But I mean, I could do that, and this is a small scale. Can't do that in a big thing.
Do you like being surrounded by decay? I mean, is
Yeah.
there something that reminds you
Do you
of...
know it doesn't I don't know, it's like a lot of things, you don't notice stuff after a while.
I mean, there's that phrase, memento mori, right? Like, does it remind you of your own?
My own decay. That's a really good, a really, really interesting idea, because I am, despite what everybody else says, I am decaying.
We all are. It's interesting, our fascination with decay.
It is. I like that question about it being about my own fate, my own, what's it called?
Memento
own-
mori is what the Romans used to say.
Okay.
That it means remember you will die. But just live that way, right? So I don't know if architecture can do that for you, to remind you that, you know, take advantage of these moments, nothing's forever. And maybe that's too philosophical, but...
No, I kind of like that.
But it's amazing.
But it's quite nice to see the old stuff in there. That door is where the original door was. You can see actually the hinges, I think. I see some hinges through here. There used to be a door here. In many ways, it was incredibly pragmatic, this job. We got an old building, we can't knock it down, didn't really want to repair it. It was beyond repair, so what do? You stick something over it, you put another building on the top of it to protect it. That's kind of it. But you do know that you're working with something romantic in a way, and something unusual. And I'm really glad that we weren't allowed to knock this thing down, because if I had to build something new within this envelope, it would be really interesting, but I don't think I could have made it 300 years old interesting. That's quite a difficult thing to beat, you know. For example, if you look at this root here with all of the ivy here, that's difficult to beat. I can't do it. You know, if you had to make a modern building, you have to compete with that. And I just don't think I could do it. I don't want to be unromantic, but it was very pragmatic. Once you're spending £80,000 to preserve something, I think I want to preserve it all. You know, there's a kind of pragmatism about it. I kind of like that about architecture, is it has to be pragmatic as well as poetic. Otherwise, it's pretty useless, you know.